Hi, Misha here. And you ever just feel like shooting a gun? Not for any particular reason. These days, when we go to the range, oftentimes the guns we pack are ones that are new that we want to show you guys. Sometimes there are customer guns that need test firing after work was done. Sometimes there are guns that need test firing after work was done. And there's only so many hours in the day. So oftentimes, we don't get to shoot just for pure fun, which is sad because when we were younger, that's all we did. Well, on our recent range trip, I threw this guy in at the last minute just because we've only had this one out 1 or 2 times before, and I recalled it being fun. And those times, it was very reliable. So I thought, why not bring it again? This is the Spanish CETME Mod.LC. And this is the semi-auto version produced by MARCOLMAR. And these are pretty limited production. So let's run a few rounds with it with the little Spanish 12-round mag. CETME LC. No problems. Of course, just 12 little rounds. These mags are used for guard duty and whatnot, maybe grenade launching. They're a little different. They don't have the bolt hold open trip because the guns don't have one. And they have this kind of spring retained floor plate. They're basically taken and are copies of the FNC mags. On the other hand, as you drop it there, on the other hand they are steel, not alloy, but they have kind of a mixed reputation. Now, the original Spanish guns could feed from Stenag mags, M4, M16, although the receiver tolerances were such that sometimes not all would fit. But the MARCOLMARs do. They were designed especially to feed from Stenag mags. Now, Gen 1s would feed from Stenag, but maybe wouldn't fit the Spanish mags because, again, the specs are just a little bit different. But Gen 2s like this one will reasonably feed from both. They've opened up the mag well. Tolerance is just enough that pretty much any standard mag should fit. So, yeah, let's do a full 30-round mags. LC. And again, no problems there. We tried 3 or 4 different 30-round mags when we were out there, not really paying attention, just the ones that were lying around. Now the LC variant, of course, features the collapsing stock. And whenever you have a collapsing stock, you have to wonder, will it fire with it collapsed in? To collapse it, it's pretty simple. There's a button right on top here. Just press in. It's only 2 position, in or out. The stock is steel, and the butt plate is rubber, which is actually quite nice. Better than the meat tenderizer on the HKs. So yeah, let's see how it works. Let's try the LC this way. And again, no problems at all. Which I was a little not surprised but interested in, because this is a roller delayed blowback, or roller lock if you prefer, gun, which means it uses the recoil and inertia to cycle properly. And on some of these guns, especially depending on the ammo, you need that stock braced against your shoulder to provide kind of a backstop and enough resistance to keep it recoiling. But no, it fired freehand just fine. So, yeah, had a lot of fun with it. And fun is always best shared. So, let's let Jay take a gander. And Jay is going to give it a go. We ran quite a few rounds through it, just for fun. Tried different types, Aguila, Wolf, a few others, and it was not ammo sensitive at all. No issues or problems at all to speak of. And I did think it would be good to kind of highlight the LC, because while we have shown this in a previous video, it was in a larger video dedicated to the CETME Mod.L and comparing the original HMG with the newer MARCOLMAR production guns and showing kind of the pros and cons of each. And this little carbine really deserves its own video because it's, I'm not going to say rare, but pretty special production. MARCOLMAR says that they had about 10,000 CETME L kits, and of those they only had about 640 usable LC Carbine kits. Now the C in LC stands for corto, or short. It obviously has this collapsing stock. It also has a shorter barrel. Now this one has an extension pinned on to bring it to 16. But the original barrel length is 12.6 inches, 320 millimeter. With the stock collapsed in and that short barrel, it's just over 26 inches long. And with the stock fully deployed, it's just under 34 inches long. So quite compact. And with this metal stock, it weighs about 7 3/4 pounds unloaded. Maybe not the absolute lightest gun, but for the 1980s, 1990s, not exactly the heaviest either. And as MARCOLMAR states on their website, this was the last roller-delayed rifle to see full military adoption. But it was a bit of a flash in the pan. The entire L lineup was. And they're, at least up until recently, very uncommon in the USA. So yeah, let's just kind of do a quick overview of their history and features, because why not? I gotta give you your full quarter's worth, right, for this video. LC. And here's the standard Model L rifle. This is my HMG build. Why I kept an HMG and a MARCOLMAR, I do explain in a video we did last year. You can check that out. The original even rifle is actually quite svelte to begin with. It has a 400 millimeter barrel, which is about 15.6, 15.7 inches. So let's just say 3 inches longer. It has an overall length of just under 36.5 inches, And because a polymer stock is going to weigh less than a steel stock, it actually weighs about 7.5 pounds. It's actually quite slim and trim. And this being a roller-locked gun, these are both, of course, in 5.56 NATO 223, but they are not at all related to the HK33. The HK33 is basically a scaled-down G3, or a scaled-up MP5. But with the L, CETME really made its own gun pattern. While it was based on their successful Mod.LC, it is a whole different design. And the Spanish government was interested in a .223 caliber gun as far back as the 1960s after seeing America use it in Vietnam. CETME worked throughout the 70s, and really it was quite far along by 1980 with the first prototypes around 81, then trials, and so on and so forth. And then they were finally accepted and ordered into production in 84. And then it would begin in 1986 at the Santa Barbara factory, with the first rifles being delivered to the military in 1987. And their initial order would be 60,000. And of course, the majority would be rifles, because why would you not? But for paratroopers, the Spanish Marines, and some other special forces, they wanted a compact carbine. Obviously the stock, but also the shorter barrel help it all to be quite a bit smaller. I mean, it's 10 inches smaller with the stock collapsed in. Unfortunately, it wasn't completely easy to do this. The original rifle nests its recoil spring in the stock, so to go to a collapser, you had to move the recoil spring up into the receiver, which required a new bolt carrier, also a new cocking handle, strut inside, so some internal changes. Of course, we have the shorter barrel. The original rifle has a bayonet lug here on the front sight base and a grenade ring on the barrel. The carbine cannot launch grenades. It doesn't have a ring. The barrel would be far too short, and it would be too short for a bayonet lug, so the front sight base does not have one. It did use the same handguard and pistol grip, and the standard magazine was 30 rounds, but again the 12 was available. There were some changes from early to late versions. For example, early would have the 3-prong open flash hider, late would have a closed bird cage like this one. The sights would change a little bit from very early to late. Also, early handguards would be a little different. Small things like that. And deliveries would continue throughout the late 1980s. And these first would be deployed for NATO operations, Operation Desert Shield in 1990. And see combat in the first Gulf War in 1991. And unfortunately for Spain, the CETME L earned quite a bad reputation. Numerous reasons that I don't want to get into now. Some had to do with the magazines, also loose manufacturing tolerances, and also the Spanish ammunition was not the greatest quality. It had a very hot burning, very quick burning powder, which gave high chamber pressures. It also had hard primers. In fact, it was so that other NATO forces were told not to use Spanish ammunition in their guns, and Spanish soldiers, when they could, would toss away their mags for Stanag mags. Yeah, of course, being off roller lock, they didn't have a gas system, and they have these quite neat manual bolt hold open switches in the back here. Otherwise, pretty standard controls. There is a version 2 known as the CETME LV that has a scope mount on top, but I don't have one of those because what am I going to do with the scope? So yeah, their combat debut in 1991 was actually so unsuccessful that that year further development, refinement, and even production of the Model L series was halted in 1991. The last order would be delivered. Now it's worth pointing out that most of the LCs were made between 1989 and 1991, so they were usually later production guns. Just something to point out. And already by the mid-90s, the Spanish were looking at ways to replace these, eventually adopting a license-produced version of the G36E. So by 2000-2001, the CETME was being pulled out of frontline service. By 2002, most of them were out, with only a few left in reserves and police use. They did try converting them to semi-auto to sell in Europe and other markets, but of course too much restriction in gun laws. So eventually the kits were cut up and sold over here a few years ago. And they would make around 100,000 in total. And it's been said that the ones made for Spanish police are a little higher quality than the ones made for the military, because the police guns weren't made with kind of a contract stipulation for cost. So with all the problems surrounding the full autos, military guns, you would think that the US kit guns would be kind of terrible. But in reality, they're not. HMG already probably made a better gun, more reliable than the original. In fact, take a look at some shooting footage we did last year from it. HMG with Silver Bear.
Clear.
I'd say that was the one it liked. HMG with full mag of Wolf. Alrighty. So the HMG guns are already at least as nice to shoot as the originals, and maybe even better. Of course, US receiver, US barrel, and to make them legal, they extend it from 15.7 to 16 inches, and threaded, removable muzzle device, bayonet lug. And they ship with the original Spanish furniture. Pretty nice guns. And then from there, MARCOLMAR really almost redesigned the whole gun. They certainly rebuilt it. Another receiver shell, a US barrel, this time cold hammer forged, nitrided, not chrome lined though. They put all new springs in. They redid the sights, although on the LCs they didn't because of the rarity. And MARCOLMAR made all new American plastic polymer furniture because they weren't happy with the condition of the Spanish, although the steel buttstock is original. And on mine, I've actually put Spanish military handguards and pistol grip back on it because it's me, of course I would. And it continues to be even more reliable. And they're a lot of fun. The big thing about the HMG, it doesn't have the flare to the ejection port. It's not that they didn't know about it. It's just not having this flare there really saves a lot of machining difficulty and is just more cost effective. But MARCOLMAR really went the distance with theirs and did everything they could. That said, there are still things about the HMG that are in some ways more authentic, or just other better choices. And again, things about the MARCOLMAR. Again, we've done a whole video kind of comparing and contrasting. Objectively, the MARCOLMAR is probably a better gun, but in some ways the HMG is a more authentic gun. Now, HMG has never done an LC. Could you build an LC using their receiver? Sure. But MARCOLMAR is the one that's done these, and again, they are only going to do around 600 guns. and they are not cheap. The L's are $1,300, $1,350, but the LCs, because of the rarity and the barrel and everything and the stock, are more like $2,000, which is pretty high. But again, it's a rare gun. Whereas we did get the Mars Model Cs made in Spain by CETME back in the day, we never did get an authentic import L out of Spain. And up until HMG and MARCOLMAR, no one ever made even a US kit version. And for those of us that kind of have 80s military collections, this really does kind of complete it. And the gun just screams kind of 80s green and everything. And it kind of was one of the last of that generation, which, reliability and reputation aside, that's why it was in frontline service so long, because it was adopted so late in the 80s. Already by the late 90s, things like Picatinny rails, optics, whatnot were becoming very much the standard. So while this was fine when development began in the late 70s, by that time in the 90s it was looking outdated. That plus, again, questionable effectiveness of the gun spelled its very rapid end. Thus today it's not a very well known gun. In fact, because of all the CETME Cs and 308, that's when people hear the name CETME, that's automatically what they assume and think of. But no, this is the L. And if you ever get a chance to shoot one, you should do it. They're actually, the recoil impulse and everything is a lot of fun. And both of mine here have been very reliable. And quite amazingly, typically these type of collapsing stocks are not pleasant, but this one actually is. The metal doesn't tend to whack you. They have a nice strong recoil buffer in them, so the recoil is plenty manageable. The gun's heavy enough to soak it up, but not so heavy that it's unpleasant. And it actually has a concave and pretty thick rubber recoil pad, which is something a lot of those HK stocks could use. Yeah, I know some HK stocks have recoil pads, but a lot don't. And the fact that they fire both 55 grain and 62 and feed from standard mags, that means you don't have to buy a whole host of specialized equipment for these. They also use the same sling as the Model C. It just attaches differently in the back. Back here. Yeah. And yeah, that's about it. If you'd like to know more, you can check out our previous videos. We've done them on both, including showing some accessories. I just really felt like shooting this gun, and it's one Jay enjoys too. So it's one of those guns that's just always fun to take out, because it doesn't demand a lot from you, and it runs and runs and doesn't leave you bruised. The trigger is okay on these. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's really no worse than a lot of, HK type guns. Let me flip this over here. The selector is standard in the usual place. Of course, in a military gun, it would have 3 positions. On these, it's 2. The mag catch is in a bit of an awkward place, but that's where it was originally. These never had the paddle. And disassembly starts off much like a HK with these 2 push pins, but then the trigger pack is directly interfaced with the receiver. It doesn't have a whole separate housing on an HK. There, and again, the handguard is kind of similar. It has a push pin in the front, but then it kind of, way it comes off because it overlaps the back, is a little different. They're in no way HK copies, and they're only similar truly in the sense that they're roller delayed guns. So mechanically quite interesting. And since no imports will ever be coming in of these, I think even guns like the LV and LC that MARCOLMAR are producing will become collectible, at least in certain circles. Probably not a widespread interest. And I really don't see much reason to try to make this modern kind of go-to-war gun, because it's not, and it never will be. You don't buy one of these because it's objectively better or even as good as what's out there. You just buy it for fun and for collecting, and just because it's weird. And it's perfectly fine for a gun to do that and nothing else. Not every gun has to be the pinnacle. Some guns you can just have to enjoy and because you want them. So, yeah, with that, I'll end. Question. What guns of yours do you have that don't really serve a practical purpose, but you just enjoy? Be kind of fun to talk about that in the comments below. And if you have any questions about either the MARCOLMAR, the MCM, or the herein Mac guns, HMG, please post them below. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. And as always, if you could, like, share, and subscribe. With that, this is Misha, and we'll catch you very soon. Next time. The LC with Little Spanish Mac and Wolf. Helps if I take the safety off.
Yeah, you're good.
Just want to make sure that safety works, that's all. LC with Silver Bear.